Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so much for tuning on in. Today we're going to be talking about redesigning Lomas Boulevard in Albuquerque, New Mexico to better serve the community. The reason why I'm making this video is that Albuquerque has entirely too many stroads. If you don't know what a stroad is, there are plenty of videos that go into the explanation of how corridors that try to be both a street and a road serve neither function very well. And my short take on it is, streets are destinations. The places that you ultimately need to go to, be that your home, a coffee shop, universities, concert halls, any of those are located on streets. Some good examples of streets in Albuquerque are Central and Nob Hill, Central Downtown, 4th Street, and then Silver. Then contrasting to streets, roads are thoroughfares. They're designed to get people, whether they're pedestrians, bicyclists, in a bus, or in a car, through an area as quickly as possible. Some good examples of roads in Albuquerque include Tramway. There's a really nice Class 1 bike path completely separated from the road, and the only turnoffs occur at traffic lights once every half mile or so. Another example of a road is Southern Boulevard. There's a Class 2 bike lane and also a separated bike and pedestrian path. And one thing I want y'all to notice is that the houses are not pointed towards the road because the road is designed to carry traffic through. So pedestrians and bicyclists and cars can all get through Southern Boulevard. Unfortunately, most of Northeast Albuquerque is a rectilinear stroad mesh on a 1-mile pitch. Wantabo, Eubank, Wyoming, Louisiana, especially Louisiana, and San Mateo are all north-south running stroads. Likewise, Montgomery, Manal, Lomas, and the east end of Central are all east-west running stroads. And Ray Delahante, known in this community as the City Nerd, I'm sure I botched his last name, but welcome to the club. He did a video looking at how Central had been converted from a stroad into a street. And that may be true in the more western parts of Albuquerque, but in my district, it's still very much a stroad. But nonetheless, that video inspired me to make this one, looking at how we could improve other portions of Albuquerque to work better for everybody who lives here and everybody who's visiting. So we'll look at how to improve that portion of Central as well as other stroads in future videos, but we're going to relegate the scope of this discussion to only talking about Lomas for the time being. As it stands, Lomas is very much a stroad, but we do need an east-west thoroughfare to connect those who live in the foothills like myself to downtown, and vice versa. Now the 11 bus does do a great job of serving this function, but I'll be honest, we don't need 3 lanes of traffic each direction to carry people and cars all the way through. I think we can get away with 2 lanes. What we need to do is widen the sidewalk and convert the remainder of those outermost lanes into bike lanes and bus pullouts. There would still be 2 lanes in each direction for vehicular traffic, but with the bus pullouts, motorists wouldn't have to avoid bus drivers having to stop for people riding the bus. And here's a transparent overlay of the proposed system. You can see the sidewalk is widened, there's now a bike lane, and where there's bus stops, the bus pulls into the bike lane and bicyclists would have to go around. Taking a page from the playbook on Central, we do need to reduce the number of left turns onto a major thoroughfare. Instead, the left turn signals at traffic lights could also serve as U-turn signals. That way, people needing to turn left onto a major thoroughfare could do so safely with the help of a light and the protection of a light. If you need to turn left onto a major arterial, you either turn right and then take a U-turn, or you turn left onto that thoroughfare at a traffic light. Additionally, we need to reduce the number of entrances and exits onto Lomas and instead make sure that the businesses and apartment complexes can be accessed via side streets instead. The reason for doing this is just reducing the number of conflict points. When buses and motorists and pedestrians and bicyclists have less conflict points to contend with, all of a sudden you reduce the number of crashes. And to articulate what I'm talking about, let's take a look at the atrium, the apartment complex on the corner of Lomas and Morris. If you take a look, there's 2 entrances on Lomas Boulevard and 1 on Morris. Do we really need 2 entrances, or can we get away with 1 on Morris and 1 on Lomas? Another example of this is the auto dealerships on Lomas. You'll notice that the auto dealers actually have some of their entrances blocked off. I don't know the motive behind this, but I think it might be to deter theft and to make sure the traffic flows through their auto dealership better. Another example of this is the Sunset Grill. Is it really necessary to have the 2 entrances, or could you enter from the side street? Finally, the last example that I want to talk about is the Smiths on the corner of Lomas and San Pedro. If you take a look at the satellite imagery, you can see that you can enter from the side street, and then you can enter from 2 entrances from Lomas, and then there's an entrance to the Stripes. Do we really need this many entrances and this many conflict points? And then finally, the sidewalk needs to be redesigned. If you're a pedestrian and you're pushing a jogger, or maybe you're riding a bike, or you're in a wheelchair, every time that there's an entrance to a business or a home, there's a dip in the sidewalk so that somebody can drive through. If we widen the sidewalk, that new portion closer to the road can serve as the ramp, while the old portion can be filled in. That way, if you're pushing a jogger or stroller, or you're in a wheelchair, you can have a smooth, flat ride all across the sidewalk, and it makes it much easier for those who are using the sidewalk. Another thing to note with the sidewalk redesign is that the road is very much graded to allow for water runoff and drainage. If we fill in that portion of the road with a sidewalk, we just need to be considerate of the fact that everything still needs to be remained graded such that drainage could take place. So let's talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of this proposed system. Now that I've explained what needs to be done, you're probably wondering, why does this guy want to reduce the number of lanes to improve traffic flow? That seems counterintuitive. That is a fair question, but I want to go back to what I was talking about earlier. First issue is the bus pullouts. As it currently stands, if you're riding the bus and you have to stop, the bus stops on the side of the road that also carries vehicular traffic. If somebody's in a car behind the bus that's stopped, it stops the flow of traffic for everybody behind them. If somebody's not paying attention, which sadly a lot of people are on their cell phones now, that could cause some serious problems. Second advantage is that you have a bike lane that's a straight shot from the foothills to downtown. As it currently stands, there's not a single shot unimpeded bike route for cyclists to get from the foothills to downtown or vice versa. This proposed system would change that. The third advantage to this proposed system is that with a reduced number of lanes, we've disincentivized street racing, which is good for everybody. So there are drawbacks to this design. I'm sure the first thing everybody's thinking is, well, if a bus has to pull into a bike lane, what are the bicyclists going to do? And my response to that is the 11 bus currently runs only every 40 minutes right now. Ideally, I'd like to see it run every 20 minutes, so it's still going to be an issue for bicyclists. The way around that is you have a soft curb up onto the sidewalk so that bicyclists can pull around the bus on the sidewalk itself. So the second disadvantage is people will not be able to make a left turn whenever they feel like it. And to that I say, we need to make this a major thoroughfare instead of a stroad. It's designed to carry people all the way through. And then the final disadvantage to such a system is that you do have the added safety hazard of right turns across bike lanes. So how do we engineer our way out of that? I would encourage everybody to take a look at Eubank heading north before you get to Central, or anywhere up and down Tramway. You have the dotted lines on the road and the striped bike lane to deal with those kinds of problems. Now let's talk about costs. Where so many urbanist channels fail is talking about costs and how to get a project funded. Fortunately, you're dealing with a professional. According to Caesar Concrete, the cost of constructing a sidewalk ranges from $12 to $22 per square foot in northern Colorado. We aren't in Fort Collins, but we'll be conservative and assume $25 per square foot. Additionally, we'll assume that we're widening the sidewalk on each side of the road by 4 feet, meaning that it's 8 feet wide total. That'll drive our cost per linear foot up to $200 per linear foot. $25 per square foot times 8 feet wide is $200 per linear foot. Next, we need to talk about bike lane construction. Looking at the figures from my previous video, you can see that the cost of building a buffered bike lane is $70 per linear foot per direction, while the cost of building a protected bike lane is $100 per linear foot per direction. It's really just a matter of what kind of protection you want to be using. When we add up the conservative figures going all the way from Tramway down Lomas to downtown with the intersection of Central, it turns out to be 10 miles. $400 per linear foot times 5,280 feet in a mile comes out to roughly $21 million. It's not cheap, but it's not a ton of money. I think the question we need to be asking ourselves is, how does that compare to other projects? First, let's talk about art. The total cost of constructing art was $130 million, and that was pre-pandemic. And yeah, $130 million is a lot of money, but art is incredibly useful. Does anybody here want to take a guess how expensive the Interstate 25 improvement project was? Looking at the website, it's $99.6 million. Just kidding. It's actually $268 million. No, wait, $278 million. Over $270 million on an interstate project to make sure that people are more dependent on cars. Meanwhile, the cost of gasoline is fluctuating rapidly, going up to $4.20 a gallon and maybe even higher. I think it's perfectly reasonable to spend 1/5 the amount of money that we're spending on the interstate on Lomas Boulevard so that people have another option besides just driving a car or waiting for a bus or anything like that. We can do better. Another thing I'd like to point out, sidewalks typically last 25 to 40 years, whereas asphalt roads only last 10 to 20 years depending on what kind of weather and what kind of traffic it sees. And while yes, Albuquerque doesn't have crazy weather, especially compared to like Montana or Idaho, Lomas does see quite a bit of traffic. The cost of repaving a road is anywhere from $150,000 to $500,000 per lane mile. But if we reduce the number of lanes from 3 to 2, we can cut down whatever the cost may be by 33%. Alrighty, so now let's talk about funding opportunities. The next question everybody should be asking right now is, where would the money come from? If we take a look at the 2026 annual budget for the city of Albuquerque, we find that we have about $1.5 billion to work with, which may seem like a lot of money, but projects like these, really it's best to get either New Mexico Department of Transportation or the U.S. federal government to fund. And yes, I do understand that there was $342 million allocated from the city of Albuquerque's budget to public infrastructure, but we can't be blowing a massive chunk of that solely on a single road. That money also needs to be used for things like power and water and buildings in general. If the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act were still in effect, we could use some of those funds to make this improvement to Lomas Boulevard. However, the current administration has made good on the Project 2025 promises, which explicitly push for car dependence. At this point, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a political tangent, although if you lasted this long, I'm probably preaching to the choir. A bunch of American voters, to the tune of about 77 million, decided that they wanted to be independent of public transit. So they decided they wanted car dependency. The joke behind that, though, is you're beholden to the price of gasoline, which is highly dependent on the price of crude oil. The folks that supported this administration ultimately discovered how dependent they actually are on the government. We could save so many Americans so much money if we invested more in bike and pedestrian infrastructure and moved away from car-dependent infrastructure. It's a win-win here. I'm not asking to build more buses. I'm not asking to build more light rail for this particular project. What I am proposing is allowing a little bit more space for bicyclists and pedestrians so that people can get around on their own 2 feet or by the power of their own quads. All that said, despite the many blunders and poor decisions that this current administration has made, I do love my country, and I want what's best for all Americans, regardless of the color of their skin or the socioeconomic strata that they come from or the religion that they practice or the language that they speak. And every day we have a choice. We have a choice to be greedy, we have a choice to be fearful, we have a choice to take and only care about ourselves, or we have a choice to be generous. We have a choice to be brave. We have a choice to leave something behind for the next generation, to make this country and this community a better place for our kids and our grandkids. I know the people in power right now have not made the right choice, but if somebody doesn't stand up and do something about this, if somebody doesn't fight this fight, it's only going to get worse. Personally, I'm not going to take it lying down. Thank y'all so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a like. If you didn't like this video, I don't know what you're doing still watching. Hopefully I've inspired you to come up with your own ideas for shovel-ready projects so that when the political pendulum swings the other way, we have a bunch of ideas ready to execute. I'd encourage you, if you have an idea, make your own video like this one. Thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next video.